Kioni Mwangi, CEO of one of Kenya's leading tech companies, TechVantage, stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his luxurious Nairobi office. From the outside, the company looked flawless, profitable, innovative, and efficient. But rumors had been swirling of corruption, harassment, and mistreatment of junior employees. Kioni had heard these complaints trickling up from HR, but he never saw hard evidence. Deep down, he knew something wasn't right. Driven by a desire to get to the bottom of the issue, Kioni devised a bold plan. He would disguise himself as a janitor to observe his company from the inside. It was the only way he could see the truth for himself, free from the curated facade presented by his managers and executives. Armed with this decision, Kioni began preparations to transform into an unrecognizable figure within his own company. Kioni contacted a trusted friend, a professional makeup artist, who helped him alter his appearance beyond recognition. His crisp suits were traded for a faded uniform, and his sleek haircut was hidden under an old cap. With a slouched posture and a fake identity, Kioni became Kamau, the new janitor at TechVantage's Nairobi headquarters. His transformation was so complete that even his closest colleagues wouldn't recognize him. Arriving for his first shift as a cleaner, Kioni felt nervous yet determined. For the first time, he would see his company from the ground up, observing how his employees treated the people they often overlooked. Little did he know, the experience would open his eyes to far more than he ever expected. On his first day as Kamau, Kioni entered the building with a mop in hand and a bucket trailing behind him. He was greeted not with respect, but with disdain. The security guard barely glanced at him, waving him off dismissively. As he made his way through the bustling office, a few employees smirked at his appearance, whispering behind his back. For the first time, Kioni felt the sting of disrespect, an emotion he had never experienced as a CEO. His first task was cleaning the boardroom after an executive meeting. As he quietly mopped the floor, two high-ranking managers walked in, oblivious to his presence. They laughed about cutting bonuses for junior staff and joked about how the company's profits came from exploiting workers. Kioni's heart sank as he listened, realizing that corruption had seeped deeper into his company than he had imagined. Kioni's second day as a janitor exposed him to even harsher realities. While cleaning the break room, he overheard a heated conversation between a junior employee, a woman named Amina, and her supervisor. The supervisor belittled her, making inappropriate comments about her appearance and threatening to cut her hours if she didn't play along. Amina was visibly uncomfortable, yet she stayed silent, trapped by the fear of losing her job. Kioni clenched his fists in anger. He had heard of such behavior, but seeing it firsthand was a different experience altogether. It wasn't just about office politics, it was about abuse, power, and fear. He made a mental note of the supervisor's name, planning to take swift action once he returned to his real position. For now, though, he remained quiet, continuing his janitorial duties while observing the dark side of his company. Over the next week, Kioni discovered just how invisible the janitorial staff were to the rest of the employees. No one made eye contact with him, no one greeted him, and most treated him as if he were a ghost. The other cleaners were no better off, their faces etched with fatigue and resignation. It became clear to Kioni that the company's hierarchy was more rigid than he had imagined. Those at the bottom weren't just ignored, they were dehumanized. As he shared a quiet meal with the janitorial staff in the basement cafeteria, Kioni listened to their stories. Many of them had been working for years without a raise or promotion. Some were struggling to make ends meet despite working long hours. They were the backbone of TechVantage, yet they were treated as expendable. Kioni's resolve hardened. He had to make things right. One day, while Kioni was cleaning the hallways, he encountered a group of mid-level managers who were notorious for their arrogance. As he bent down to scrub the floor, one of them, a man named Julius, deliberately spilled his coffee on the freshly cleaned surface. "Clean it up, quickly," Julius sneered, as his colleagues laughed. Kioni silently obliged, masking the anger bubbling inside him. To them, he was just a janitor, someone unworthy of respect. Later, he witnessed Julius berating another janitor for being too slow, throwing insults without a second thought. Kioni realized that these managers thrived on power and intimidation. They weren't just mistreating the janitors, they were creating a culture of fear throughout the entire company. Kioni's undercover mission was revealing more corruption and toxicity with each passing day. Despite the mistreatment, Kioni began forming bonds with some of the janitors and lower-level employees. One cleaner, Mwakali, had been working at TechVantage for over a decade. yet she had never been promoted or even recognized for her hard work. Over tea breaks in the dingy janitor's room, Mwikali shared stories about her life, how she supported her children on a meager salary and dealt with constant exhaustion. Mwikali's strength and resilience moved Kioni deeply. He admired her dedication to her family and her job, despite the unfair treatment she endured. Through these conversations, Kioni learned just how disconnected he had been from the reality of his employees' lives. He realized that the overhaul he planned would have to address not just the corporate structure, but also the human aspect of the business. Kioni's undercover investigation also led him to witness the greed and corruption among his top executives. One afternoon, while cleaning the executive offices, he overheard a conversation between two of his vice presidents, Ndungu and Wanjiru. They were discussing how they had manipulated company contracts to benefit their personal businesses. The two laughed about how much money they were siphoning from TechVantage without Kioni ever knowing. The blatant corruption shocked Kioni to his core. These were people he had trusted, people he believed were helping him grow the company. Yet, behind his back, they were robbing TechVantage blind. He scribbled down their names and details, adding them to the growing list of people who would face consequences when he revealed his true identity. Amidst the corruption and toxicity, Kioni found a rare ally in one of the junior executives, a woman named Zuri. While most of the higher-ups treated the janitorial staff with disdain, Zuri greeted them with respect. One day, after hours, Kioni noticed Zuri helping a struggling intern with her workload, offering guidance and encouragement. Unlike the others, Zuri seemed to care about the well-being of her colleagues. Kioni quietly observed Zuri for several days, noting her leadership skills and compassion. She was the kind of person who deserved a seat at the top, a stark contrast to the corrupt and self-serving executives. In his mind, Kioni began formulating a plan for her future role in the company's transformation. While cleaning one of the offices, Kioni stumbled upon financial records left carelessly on a desk. He quickly glanced at the figures, which revealed an alarming discrepancy between the company's reported profits and the actual money flowing through certain departments. The accounting department seemed to be in on it, fudging numbers to hide the embezzlement taking place under his nose. As he pieced together the puzzle, Kioni realized that the corruption went deeper than he had imagined. The company's growth was being stunted by the greed of a few, while the lower-level employees bore the brunt of the exploitation. His determination to expose the truth and restore justice intensified. The time for action was drawing near. As Kioni continued his undercover work, he realized that many of the employees were aware of the corruption but were too afraid to speak out. They feared retaliation from the higher-ups, knowing that any whistleblower would be blacklisted or fired. This culture of silence allowed the toxic behavior to thrive unchecked. Kioni's heart ached for the employees who suffered in silence, unable to defend themselves. He spoke to a few janitors and junior staff about their experiences, listening as they recounted stories of mistreatment and hopelessness. They felt trapped, with no avenue to voice their concerns. Kioni knew that part of his company overhaul would involve creating a safe space for employees to speak up without fear of punishment. The toxic culture had to end, and it had to end soon. Kioni's frustration reached its peak when he witnessed a young intern named Kevin being berated by his supervisor for a mistake he didn't even make. Kevin was humiliated in front of the entire office, reduced to tears as the supervisor unleashed a torrent of insults. No one came to Kevin's defense. The office was filled with people too afraid to stand up for their colleague, and the silence was deafening. Kioni couldn't take it anymore. That night, as he mopped the floors in the darkened office, he made a decision. He could no longer sit idly by and watch the abuse continue. The time had come to reveal himself and bring justice to those who had been mistreated. But before doing so, he needed to prepare for the changes he would make to ensure this never happened again. His plan for a massive company overhaul had to be ready. Before revealing his true identity, Kioni knew he needed solid evidence to back his claims. Over the next few days, he discreetly documented everything he had witnessed. He took note of the corrupt executives, the abusive managers, and the struggling employees. With each passing day, he collected a mountain of evidence that exposed the rot within TechVantage. The more he uncovered, the more determined he became to set things right. Kioni also began talking to employees on the sidelines, gathering testimonials from those brave enough to share their experiences with him. The stories of harassment, underpayment, and exploitation piled up. Armed with this knowledge, Kioni knew that when the time came to confront his team, there would be no room for excuses. On the morning of his revelation, Kioni entered the office as Kamau the janitor, as he had done for weeks. But this time, he wasn't just there to observe. He gathered everyone, the executives, managers, and even the cleaning staff, into the boardroom for an unexpected meeting. As he stood at the front of the room, still in his janitor's uniform, confusion spread across the faces of his employees. In a moment of dramatic pause, Kioni removed his cap and straightened his posture. The room fell silent as realization dawned. "I am Kioni Mwangi, CEO of TechVantage," he announced, his voice calm but firm. Gasps filled the room as people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The executives who had mocked and mistreated him were now staring at the very man they had unknowingly betrayed. With the room still in shock, Kioni laid out the evidence he had gathered during his time undercover. He listed names of corrupt executives and abusive managers, exposing their unethical behavior with hard facts. There was no denying the evidence. The people who had felt untouchable, those who had used their power to exploit and harm others, now sat in stunned silence as their actions were laid bare. Kioni's voice was measured but resolute as he detailed the consequences for those involved. Immediate terminations were announced for the most egregious offenders, while others were given an ultimatum: change their behavior or leave the company. The culture of fear and exploitation had ended. Those who had abused their power would face the consequences of their actions. Kioni turned his attention to those who had been mistreated, overlooked, and undervalued. He singled out employees like Mwakali, the cleaner who had worked tirelessly for years without recognition. He announced promotions, salary increases, and the implementation of new employee support programs designed to uplift the lower levels of the company. For the first time in TechVantage's history, the janitorial staff and junior employees were being recognized for their contributions. The room, once filled with tension, now buzzed with hope. Those who had suffered in silence saw the CEO standing up for them, ready to rebuild the company with integrity and fairness. Kioni promised that moving forward, every employee, no matter their position, would be treated with dignity and respect. The next phase of Kioni's overhaul involved restructuring the leadership team. He appointed Zuri, the compassionate junior executive he had observed, to a higher position within the company. Her leadership style, focused on empathy and collaboration, would be a cornerstone of the new TechVantage. Kioni also promoted several other employees who had demonstrated integrity and hard work, ensuring that the company's future leaders were people who truly cared about their colleagues. The corrupt executives who had abused their power were either demoted or let go. Kioni wasn't interested in revenge. He was focused on rebuilding trust within the company. Those willing to change and contribute positively to the company's new culture were given the chance to prove themselves. Those who weren't aligned with the new values were shown the door. With the leadership structure reshaped and the toxic figures removed, TechVantage began to undergo a transformation. Kioni implemented a new employee feedback system, ensuring that all voices could be heard without fear of retaliation. He introduced mentorship programs to support junior staff and promote growth within the company. The janitorial staff, who had once been invisible, were now treated as valued members of the team. Kioni's changes were not just cosmetic, they were designed to create a lasting impact. He held regular meetings with employees at all levels, fostering open communication and transparency. For the first time in a long while, the company felt like a community, united by mutual respect and shared goals. The transformation wasn't immediate, and healing the wounds left by years of corruption and mistreatment took time. Some employees found it difficult to trust the new leadership, while others were still haunted by the memories of past abuse. Kioni knew that rebuilding trust wouldn't happen overnight, but he remained patient and committed to the process. He invested in mental health programs and created safe spaces for employees to share their concerns. Slowly, the culture of fear began to fade, replaced by a culture of accountability and support. The employees who had once been silenced now felt empowered to speak up and take ownership of their roles within the company. The wounds were healing, and TechVantage was growing stronger because of it. Months after the overhaul, TechVantage emerged as a beacon of corporate responsibility in Nairobi. Kioni's decision to go undercover had not only exposed the corruption within his company, but it also set a precedent for how leadership should be done, with humility, empathy, and accountability. The company's profits soared as employee satisfaction increased, and the public took notice of the positive changes happening at TechVantage. Kioni, now back in his CEO role, often reflected on his time as Kamau the janitor. It had taught him invaluable lessons about leadership and the importance of understanding the struggles of every employee, no matter their position. As TechVantage flourished, Kioni knew that the real success of his company wasn't just in its financial growth, but in the dignity and respect with which every employee was now treated. His legacy, built on justice and change, would last for generations. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. Kindly share, subscribe, and hit the bell button for more stories like this.